Wanderers. 1966, Cosmos 110. Ugulyok the coal and Veterok the breeze orbit the Earth for 22 days. A record for human or dog till Skylab eclipses them. The dogs land not on land but ocean and are retrieved alive. 1961, Korabl Sputnik 4 and 5. Chornushka the black one strapped beside one guinea pig and several mice, and Zvyozdychka the star with dummy human companion. Each circles once, then re-enters. The tiniest cosmonauts, the guinea pig and mice, slip the historical record, as does the dummy. 1960, Korabl Sputnik 1K4. Kometa the comet and Shutka the joke. The launcher sees mid-flight, the mission aborts, but the Sputnik's re-entry capsule makes landfall as a cracked metal egg out of which the space dogs hatch, minus albumin. They have seen nothing in orbit. The thick satellite hull held no porthole, but under the rocket's heavy impetus, they have felt surges of toxic elation, as if their hearts lost their substance. Though buckled in their harnesses and gauges, in their guts and liquids they flew, weightless. 1960, Korabl Sputnik 3. Chilka the bee and Mushka the fly. Their craft launches and orbits safely, but burns up in re-entry, turned to a streak of light as it hits the air. 1960, Korabl Sputnik 2. Belka the squirrel and Strelka the arrow aboard. A year after their mission, Strelka bears a litter of 6 pups. Khrushchev presents one named Pushinka, the little pup, to young Caroline Kennedy in a complicated gesture of diplomacy. The first daughter, startled, holds the first dog, the first child of a post-orbit generation, warily. The president himself cannot feel ease around the dog, who laps at her water sometimes with a sick sort of knowing. Though born in gravity, the little puff is no child of simple rising and falling, and soon Kennedy seeks the moon landing, less the fight for a parcel of unmarred cosmos than a need to fall into fellow gravity, anywhere, nearest one, however weak, however airless. At first, the dog must be kennelled like the other animals, the horse from Ayub Khan, Leprechaun the pony, the terrier from Joe. But Caroline warms to her Pushinka and takes her to the bed. Pushinka sleeps at the first daughter's feet and lies sleeping as most dogs do. One night, weeks collecting many such nights, Jack feels in his throat a tiny bead of breath that wishes free, pulls from inside his neck, grips firm to lift him as if like a hound by the scruff, back to what? The clouds? He coughs hard. The muscular bead breaks. He walks to the window, opens it a crack, lets in the air of the district, sopping his hot wash rags. 1960, Korabl Sputnik. Chaika the seagull and Lisichka the fox. The combustion chambers in the rocket boosters burn through, and rocket and Sputnik explode less than 30 seconds into flight. We've always known how quickly bodies fall to fire, but in recent centuries we've added more exotic species of burning. Fire by spark of electricity, by gasoline, by hydrogen, by coal, uranium, chemical exposure, by explosion upon roadway, an explosion upon water, an explosion upon liftoff, on landing, even at the apex of the sky. 1957, Sputnik 2. Only 1 month after the Earth gains a second moon, a companion simply named Sputnik, satellite, as they would all be named. Another craft launches with 1 live passenger, the first wayward Earthling aboard. Culled from the street dogs of Moscow, a mongrel and therefore gifted with mongrel vigor. She's named Laika, the barker, the yapper, though the American media will dub her Mutnik. She lifts off, the news breaks. We learn she's caught orbit and now circles. Soon we ask, how on earth will they get Mutnik down? But the Soviets admit that retrieval was never a goal. They assume their Laika will have lived for 4 days after launch, eating gelled food, spinning blindly over the earth, tracked over the surface through Europe, South America, Australia, India, pulsing radio beacon instead of her eponymous yapping. Some say she survives 7 days, maybe 10, before the ship loses power and oxygen in the tiny canister depletes. 50 years later, we learn that she dies within hours, as many dogs die. The sealed tank overheats like a parked car in summer. She circles our head for a year and a half, dead pup in a dead ship, before gravity brings her down to scatter dog and sarcophagus. Who knew something as ubiquitous as air could pull a satellite to ashes? And it's too romantic to mention that her particles still seed clouds, rain down, turn to sugar, then to wood, perhaps burn again. She's lent her dust to 50 years of cycles. Matter is a loose crochet of energy. Not even energy can die.
It started with a lie. She clapped into class on the first day, a silk scarf fluttering from her neck, and said, "Bonjour mes enfants, I am Madame Lefebvre." We all knew her name was Eva Blewett. It was printed on our course schedules right next to beginning French. We took to the lie. She wasn't someone you questioned. Even by her clothes, you could tell. It was the 80s, and amidst her tapered jeans and keds, she looked like a visitor from an earlier, more dignified time. She wore skirts with stockings, dark seams running down the backs of her calves. A pillbox hat made frequent appearances. We argued over her age. Some of us thought she wasn't too old. We all sat up straight in our chairs when she came in the room. We never knew what to expect from her. Once she came in shouting, "Levez-vous, levez-vous." She got mad when she realized we didn't understand her. Clapping her arms up and down, she screamed, "Stand!" She forced us into a corner of the room, herding us with the rolling chalkboard until we were pressed so close back there, you could smell what everybody had eaten for lunch and who had smoked and who used shampoo. "Personal space," she whispered from the other side of the board, "is overrated. This is like Paris. It's intimate, close." That was the kind of thing she taught us, but what we were learning we never could say. We expected to learn grammar, to translate and analyze. She gave us exorbitant amounts of homework in our workbooks. In class the next day, we paired our answers aloud, watching her mouth purse with each wrong note in our speech. There'd always come this point when she'd just fly to the chalkboard and toss fistfuls of chalk headlong into the room. "I'm digressing," she'd scream. These digressions were long-winded, stories from her previous life. She repeated the same ones over and over until they were embedded, like copper frames in our memory. We learned to pay attention because sometimes she'd slip these questions about herself onto the test. They went like this. Question: "You all know I frequented the Parisian Opera with distinguished gentlemen. What mishap occurred during intermission one evening? What was the cause of that mishap? Answer: Your feather boa caught on fire while you lit a cigarette outside. The cause was that the man didn't light your cigarette for you and it was windy. Question: What dish should I make for the aristocratic French couple who visited my flat? What was the secret ingredient? Answer: You made them boeuf bourguignon, but didn't tell that you saw 3 cockroaches slip into the pot as you stirred. That was the secret ingredient. You said that a little texture did a lot for that stew." There was one day when she digressed into something new, a story about an old friend of hers named Leah, who was tall and willowy and wore these long skirts and had blonde hair that hung long down her back. They'd arranged to meet at the Rodin Museum and to chat and have a coffee there. When Lefebvre arrived at the museum, she saw her friend right away, but for a while Leah didn't notice. The pools on the grounds were empty, and Leah was walking around in one of the dry pools full of leaves. Lefebvre just watched her for a while. She explained, "Leah was sketching a statue called The Kiss. You can imagine it, people kissing." Leah looked like something Rodin would want to carve and hold. And I knew the moment was passing, and Leah would be like a statue, existing there only in my memory. Do you get it? I knew I'd never have a friend like her again, and that I'd move away from Paris, and my experiences there would be my past, like stone. I don't know why I realized it then, but that's when it happened. She kept gesturing a lot with her hands. Can you understand? Lefebvre asked. Do you see? She kept waving her arms up and down, up and down. We just sat and stared at her, flapping there like a giant bird in the center of the room. Her words melted into something like a squawk. If we could have borne her up and out of that room, through one of those tiny windows at the top, maybe we would have. Maybe she would have flown up out of there and away. Instead, we just sat and watched the second hand on the big clock tick slowly along. It would release us, but not her, and that was okay with us. We were so young. We still believed everything was malleable. Our futures stretched like long ribbons from our mouths. Thank you.
The Inner Circle. Every summer I saw a boy who seemed to hate all that crossed his path. Even the shade cast down from trees that had outlasted worse times than we could imagine. To the young, there are no thoughts, or rarely, of what is bigger, or beyond the inner circle of their lives. I'd seen this boy each year tear through woods with machete, burning books and benches, illuminating night, smoke trailing him like a sour ghost. Even in his small boat, the motor giving up a thin gray cloud, and it was the boat that made him famous to me. Not the boat itself, but the way he drove it, carving deep circumferences in the lake's still face, angering the quiet, riding low in the made grooves until he reached his own wake and went crashing through it, as though his life weren't turbulent enough. He needed to remake what made him. I'm talking about a boy whose name I never learned. I wasn't there when from the boat he was tossed, sent into his own small patch of violent water, the boat running smoothly, still riding circles in the lake now red. But it isn't difficult to imagine the low moaning of the motor and how different it sounded, muffled, whining under water.